already at 8,000 feet when they cut her safety straps. No warning, no reason, just the crew chief's knife cutting through the straps that kept Staff Sergeant Nora King safe on the helicopter floor. She had exactly 3 seconds to understand what was happening before 2 pairs of hands pushed her out the door into the Afghan night. No parachute, no hope, no chance. At least that's what the 5 Delta Force soldiers watching from the cabin thought. They were about to learn why the 75th Ranger Regiment had kept Nora King's secret files locked away for 7 years. But before I tell you how she survived what nobody survives, drop a comment telling us where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button. Because what happened next changed everything they thought they knew about how much a human can survive. The morning had started with fake calmness at Forward Operating Base Chapman. The Hindu Kush Mountains stood up like broken teeth against the sky, so clear it hurt to look at. Staff Sergeant Nora King sat away from the others in the meeting room, cleaning her already clean rifle with robot-like movements. 5 years in the Rangers had taught her that the quiet moments before a mission were when death liked to say hello. At 28, Nora didn't look like Hollywood's idea of a top soldier. Average height, thin rather than muscular. With dark hair, she kept shorter than the rules required, and brown eyes that never quite seemed to stay still on any one thing. The kind of face that could disappear in a crowd, which had helped her in places where being remembered got you killed. King. Major Harrison's voice broke through her thoughts. You're sitting this one out. She looked up, hands still working the rifle's bolt. Sir, orders from up high. We're taking the Delta boys on this one. They need the flight hours and command wants them to get used to our area. You're just riding along to learn the land. No groundwork. He pointed to the 5 soldiers lying across the meeting room's plastic chairs. The Delta Force team looked like they'd been carved from the same block of stone. All sharp corners and barely held back violence. Their leader, Master Sergeant Cole Hammer Roar, had the kind of scarred face that showed he collected knife fights like some people collected stamps. Copy that, sir, Nora replied. But something cold settled in her stomach. In 5 years of missions, she'd never been kept on the bench without a reason. Specialist Danny Kim, her usual partner, caught her eye from across the room. His face said everything. Something's wrong. But before either could say their worries, the meeting began. Operation Copper Valley, Harrison said, pulling up a satellite picture on the screen. Spy cameras picked up a high-value target moving through the Korangal. Ahmad Rashidi, bomb maker, helper, and the bad guy responsible for 3 of our killed in action last month. The room's energy changed, got sharper. Nora knew 2 of those killed in action personally. Good men blown apart by bombs that had Rashidi's special way of making them. Pressure plates hidden under trash. Second bombs placed exactly where first helpers would step. Delta takes the lead on the ground. Harrison continued. Normal grab operation. King, you're in the bird for watching only. Questions? Roar leaned back in his chair. Why do we need Ranger watching if we're not expecting fighting? Safety, Harrison replied. King knows these mountains better than anyone. If things go wrong, she can guide you out. The meeting broke down into detailed plans. Approach paths, backup plans, escape routes. Nora memorized it all, even though she supposedly wouldn't need it. That cold feeling in her stomach had grown into something with teeth. Kim found her at the weapons room as she loaded magazines. This stinks, he said right away. You've led 17 missions in the Korangal. Now, suddenly your taxi service? Orders are orders. She slipped another magazine into her vest, then another. If she was just watching, she shouldn't need more than basic fighting gear. She took double. Anyway, Nora, some things I know. She met his eyes. Watch your back out here, Danny. Something feels wrong about everything today. The Black Hawk lifted off at 2,300 hours, rotor blades beating the thin mountain air into obedience. The Delta team sat in practiced silence, their night vision goggles making them look like old-time insects in the green-colored darkness. Nora positioned herself near the door gunner supposedly to watch the land, but really because it gave her the best shooting angles if needed. 20 minutes into the flight, the radio crackled. Approaching phase line Alpha, the pilot said. 3 minutes to target. That's when Roar stood up. The movement looked normal, like he was stretching, but Nora's hand moved toward her handgun. In the green wash of her night vision, she saw him signal his team. Small movements, almost invisible, but she'd learned to see violence in all its forms. King. Roar's voice came through her headset, talking like normal despite the rotor noise. You know what your problem is? She turned slightly, keeping her side vision on the other Delta soldiers. Tell me. You're too good. Command noticed. The Karangal belongs to you. Every warlord, every smuggler, every fighter knows the female ranger who walks their mountains like she was born in them. He moved closer, and now Nora could see the other's moving position, creating a box around her. That kind of reputation is bad for business. Whose business? The kind that pays better than Army's salary. His hand moved to his knife, not threatening, just resting there. Rashidi isn't just a bomb maker. He's a helper. Opium, weapons, information. He moves it all, and he's willing to pay a lot to anyone who removes obstacles. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clearness. This wasn't a mission. It was a murder. How much? She asked, buying time while her mind ran through options. 5 soldiers, small space, 8,000 feet up. The math wasn't good. 50,000 each, plus future help. Roar actually smiled. Nothing personal, King. You're just too good at your job. The smuggling routes need to stay open, and you keep closing them. So you throw me out a helicopter and tell everyone it was an accident. Equipment problems happen all the time in these mountains. Harness breaks, soldier falls, sad accident, full military honors. He pulled the knife free, its blade black against the green night vision world. Unless you want to make this hard. Nora's mind thought through a dozen plans in the space between heartbeats. She could fight, but 5-on-1 in a small space would end badly. She could call for help, but the pilots might be in on it. She could. The knife moved faster than thought, cutting through her harness straps with doctor-like accuracy. Before she could react, hands grabbed her arms, her vest, lifting and pushing in one smooth motion. The Blackhawk's door opened wide beside her. 8,000 feet of nothing beyond its edge. Should have stayed home, Ranger, Roar said. Then they threw her out. The night swallowed her whole. Free fall at top speed is about 120 miles per hour. At that speed, the human body becomes a missile ruled by science and nothing else. Most people would have spent their last seconds screaming, waving their arms, praying. Nora King did none of those things. Instead, she went to work. First thing, position. She spread her arms and legs into a stable curved position, using her body like a wing to control how she fell. The mountains rushed up at her with scary speed, but panic was something she couldn't afford. She had maybe 40 seconds before hitting the ground. Second thing, location. The green-colored world, through her night vision goggles, showed the Karangal Valley spread below, like a 3-dimensional map. She knew these mountains perfectly. Every ridge, every valley, every seasonal stream. There, a shine of reflected moonlight. Karangal River running high with melted snow. Third thing, angle. She shifted her body position, tracking toward the river. The water would be ice cold, barely above freezing. But it was better than rock. The angle had to be perfect. Too steep, and the hit would be like hitting concrete. Too shallow, and she'd bounce across the surface, breaking every bone in her body. 20 seconds. She pulled her rifle tight against her chest, locked her ankles, and positioned her hands to protect her head. Below, the river looked like a silver thread. At the speed, it might as well be. 10 seconds. Nora had a sudden, clear memory of Ranger School, the combat water survival course. The teacher, a tough veteran named Martinez, showing high-altitude water entry. The body can survive amazing hits if you know how to spread out the force. It's not about being tough. It's about being smart. Science doesn't care about your feelings. 5 seconds. She rotated her body, going from flat to almost straight up, feet first, but angled forward at 45 degrees. Toes pointed, muscles tight, but not stiff. The secret was to break through the surface and let the water slowly slow her fall, not hit it like a wall. 2 seconds. Time slowed down. The river filled her vision. No longer a thread, but a rushing flow of melted snow and stone. She could see individual ripples, the way the water broke around underwater rocks. Too late to change. Too late for anything but commitment. 1 second, she took the deepest breath of her life. Impact. The world exploded into chaos and pain. Even at the best angle, hitting water from 8,000 feet was like being beaten by invisible hammers. The shock traveled up through her feet, her legs, her spine, trying to crush her skeleton into itself. Her vision went white, then black, then white again. But she'd calculated correctly. Instead of breaking on impact, she broke through the surface like a knife, the water slowly bleeding off her speed as she dove into the dark. The cold was beyond words, so strong it felt like burning. Every nerve screaming in protest. Her lungs crushed by the hit, screamed for air. But she was still moving too fast, still going deeper. The river was maybe 20 feet deep here, and she hit the bottom hard enough to make a hole in the mud. Rocks scraped against her vest. Her helmet cracked against something solid, and her left shoulder burst with pain that meant it was out of place at minimum. But she was alive. Nora pushed off the bottom with legs that barely worked, kicking toward what she hoped was the surface. The current had already carried her downstream. The water, so cold it was stealing her strength with every second. Her gear, filled with water and heavy, tried to drag her back down. Her head broke the surface, and she gasped, sucking in air that tasted like life itself. The current slammed her into a rock, adding broken ribs to her growing list of injuries. But the hit also pushed her toward the shallow water. She grabbed at rocks, fingernails breaking, until she could drag herself partly onto a gravel bar. For 30 seconds, she just lay there coughing up river water and blood. Every breath a song of pain. Her left shoulder was definitely out of place, at least 2 ribs broken, and something in her right knee had torn during impact. But she was breathing. She was thinking. She was alive. Above, the Blackhawk's rotors were fading into the distance. They'd probably circle back to make sure she was dead, but the river had carried her almost a quarter-mile downstream from where she hit. In the darkness, with the tree cover, they'd never spot her. Nora forced herself to her knees, then to her feet. Standing took 3 tries and left her vision going gray at the edges. But energy from fear was a powerful drug. She needed to move. The temperature was dropping, her clothes were soaked, and freezing to death would kill her just as dead as the fall should have. She stumbled into the trees, each step painful, and found a group of rocks that formed a natural shelter. With her good arm, she pulled out her emergency kit, waterproof because she'd learned long ago that being ready meant assuming everything would go wrong. Fire starter, emergency blanket, basic medical supplies. She couldn't risk a fire. The smoke would give her away, but the emergency blanket would help keep what body heat she had left. The pain medicine shot called to her, promising relief from the song of pain playing through her body, but she couldn't afford the foggy thinking. Not yet. Instead, she gritted her teeth and put her shoulder back in place. The sound it made going back into the socket was wet and horrible, and she had to bite down on her rifle sling to keep from screaming. Next, she used her rifle sling to create a temporary binding for her ribs. It wouldn't fix them, but it would keep her from stabbing a lung if she had to move fast. Her radio was destroyed, filled with water, and cracked from the hit. Her GPS emergency signal had survived, but turning it on would tell her location to everyone, including the Delta team that had just tried to murder her. She was alone, hurt, and thought to be dead in enemy land. Most people would have given up, waited for death or rescue. But Nora King wasn't most people. She was a ranger, and rangers don't quit. They also don't forget. As she huddled under the emergency blanket, feeling slowly returning to her arms and legs, Nora began to plan. Roar and his team thought they had removed a problem. They were about to learn they'd created something much worse. A ranger with nothing left to lose and everything to prove. Dawn came like a blessing and a curse. The sun's warmth was welcome after a night of bone-deep cold, but it also meant the hunt would begin. Roar's team would need proof of her death, and when they didn't find a body, they'd come looking. Nora had moved twice during the night, ignoring her body's complaints. Pain was just information, and information could be thought about and put away. She learned that in places where showing weakness got you killed faster than bullets. Her current position was a shallow cave, really just a rock sticking out, but it gave her a hiding spot and a good view of the valley below. Through her cracked but working binoculars, she watched the Black Hawk return, circling the river like a vulture. It hovered near where she hit, and she could imagine the conversation inside. Confusion, worry, the growing realization that they hadn't found a body. The helicopter landed on a flat section of riverbank. 5 figures came out, spreading out in a search pattern. Even from far away, she recognized Roar's special walk. Hunting, confident. They were armed for war, not rescue, which told her everything about what they wanted. Her rifle had survived the fall, protected by its case and her body. She'd taken it apart and cleaned it during the night, working by touch in the darkness. Now she settled into a shooting position, using a fallen tree as support for her hurt shoulder. The distance was too far, nearly 800 meters, and with her injuries, she could maybe make one good shot before the kickback became too painful. But one shot could change everything. She watched them search, patient as stone. They were good. She'd give them that professional movement, overlapping shooting areas, textbook small group fighting methods. But they were also too sure of themselves, assuming they were hunting a dead body, not a survivor. One of them, Sergeant Briggs, she thought, stopped to drink from his water bottle. A small thing, a human moment, but it meant he felt safe. That was their first mistake. Nora lined up the shot, adjusting for wind, height, and the slight shaking in her hand from the cold and pain. The math was automatic, carved in her muscle memory by thousands of hours on the shooting range. Breathe in, breathe out, find the natural pause between heartbeats. She didn't shoot Briggs. That would have been expected, obvious. Instead, she put a bullet through Roar's radio antenna. The high-powered rifle's sound echoed across the valley like thunder. The antenna exploded in a shower of sparks and plastic, and 5 top soldiers hit the dirt like their strings had been cut. The message was clear: I'm alive. I can reach you. And this is your only warning. For 10 seconds, nothing moved except the river. Then Roar's voice carried across the valley, made louder by the mountain sound effects. King, I know that's you. She didn't answer, just watched through her scope as they scrambled for better cover. They'd gone from hunters to hunted in the space of trigger pull, and the thinking of that switch was more crushing than any bullet. We can work this out, Roar called. It was just business. Nora smiled grimly. Everything was just business until someone started shooting back. She moved, traveling through the pain to a new position. Rule 1 of sniper fighting: never fire twice from the same place. Her knee barely held her weight, and black spots danced at the edges of her vision, but she'd worked in worse condition. In Iraq, she'd completed a mission with a bullet in her hip. In Afghanistan's Paktika province, she'd walked 12 miles with a broken leg bone. Pain was temporary. Death was permanent. The Delta team was moving now, trying to get around her suspected position. Good fighting methods, but they were making another assumption, that she was trying to escape. They didn't understand that she wasn't running. She was hunting. Nora had spent 5 years learning every trail, every cave, every hidden path in these mountains. The locals called her the Ghost Walker, the American woman who appeared and disappeared like morning mist. Those same trails that smugglers used to move drugs, she now used to move herself, staying ahead of the Delta team's chase, but always visible enough to keep them following. She led them deeper into the valley, away from their helicopter, away from help. The pilot would be getting nervous, checking his fuel, wondering why his passengers hadn't returned. Every minute that passed was a minute closer to someone raising an alarm. At a narrow section of trail, she had left a surprise. Not an explosive, nothing that obvious, but a simple falling log trap, the kind local hunters used. When Sergeant Cooper, bringing up the back, hit the trigger, a log swung down from above. He dodged it barely, but the movement sent him stumbling off the trail and down a steep slope. Not deadly, but his ankle snapped loudly when he hit the bottom. Now they were down to 4, and they had to carry their wounded man. The math was getting worse for them with every passing hour. King. Roar's voice had lost its confident edge. This doesn't end well for you. Even if you make it back, who's going to believe you? 5 decorated Delta soldiers against 1 ranger with stress problems. You know how this plays out. He was right, of course. Her word against theirs, assuming any of them survived to give testimony. But Nora wasn't planning on a he said, she said ending. She had something better in mind. Night fell again, and with it came the cold that turned breath into clouds and made fingers clumsy on triggers. The Delta team had made camp in a defendable position. Good high ground, clear shooting areas, rock formations for cover. Professional to the end. But they'd made one big mistake. They'd camped near water, a small stream that ran down from the higher areas. Water meant noise, which covered movement, and it also meant predictable approach routes for anyone needing to drink. Nora waited until 0300, the dead time, when even alert guards fought to keep their eyes open. She'd spent the day gathering what she needed. Not weapons, but information. A rescued radio from an old Taliban hiding spot. Damaged, but working enough to receive. Batteries from the same hiding spot. And most importantly, a small digital recorder she always carried, the one that had survived the fall in its waterproof case. She couldn't send on the damaged radio, but she could listen, and what she heard proved her suspicions. Roar's team was using a coded frequency, but codes didn't matter when she could hear their side of the conversation. Package is still active, Roar was saying. Request immediate pickup and quick reaction force help. Yes, sir. I understand the problems. No, sir. We can't confirm killing. Copy. Clean up and extract. Clean up. Military speak for leaving no proof, no witnesses. They weren't just going to kill her now. They were going to erase any trace that she'd ever been here. But Nora had one advantage they didn't know about. 3 nights ago, she'd hidden supplies in these mountains. Standard procedure for long-range scouting. Extra ammunition, medical supplies, and most importantly, a satellite phone with a fully charged battery. The hiding spot was 2 kilometers away, past the Delta team's position. To reach it, she'd have to go through them, not around. Most people would have called that impossible. Nora called it Tuesday. She moved like water, like shadow, like the ghost the locals believed her to be. Every step calculated, every breath controlled. Her injuries screamed with each movement, but pain was just the body's opinion, and she didn't have to listen. The Delta team had set 2 guards, Briggs on the north side, Matthews on the south. Good positioning, overlapping watching areas, but they were watching for someone trying to escape, not someone trying to sneak in. Nora belly crawled through their edge, so slow that motion sensors wouldn't notice her movement, so quiet that even the mountain mice didn't run. It took her an hour to cover 50 meters, but patience was a sniper's first skill. She passed close enough to Briggs to hear his breathing, see the cloud from his breaths in the cold air. Her hand found a rock perfectly sized, and she threw it into the darkness behind him. The sound was small but clear, and his head snapped around, rifle tracking toward the noise. In that moment of distraction, she moved past him, flowing into the camp itself. Roar and the others were sleeping, trusting their guards. She could have killed them all, slit throats quick and quiet, but death would be too easy, too clean. She wanted them to face justice, to have their betrayal exposed. Instead, she found what she was looking for. Roar's satellite phone charging from a portable battery pack. She couldn't take it. They'd notice immediately, but she could use it. Her fingers flew across the keypad, sending a coded message to the one person she trusted completely. Kim would get the message when he woke. Location, situation, request for backup. More importantly, he'd know to check the emergency hiding spot where she was about to leave the digital recording of Roar's conversations. Mission complete. She began her escape, but as she moved past Roar's sleeping form, his eyes opened. For a frozen moment, they stared at each other in the darkness. His hand started moving toward his weapon. Nora's knife was faster. Not a killing blow. She drove it through his hand, pinning it to the ground. His scream woke the camp, but she was already moving, vanishing into the darkness as lights blazed and voices shouted. "Find her!" Roar roared, pulling the knife free with a sound that was part pain, part rage. "Find her now!" but finding a ghost in mountains that belonged to her was like catching smoke with bare hands. Nora reached her hiding spot as dawn painted the peaks orange and gold. The satellite phone connected on the first try. "Danny," she said when Kim answered, his voice thick with sleep that instantly vanished when he heard hers. "I need you to listen very carefully. Record this call." She told him everything: the setup, the attempted murder, the confession she'd recorded. As she spoke, she could hear helicopters in the distance, multiple birds coming fast. Either rescue or murder, depending on who arrived first. "Nora, stay put," Kim said. "Harrison's scrambling everyone. We're coming for you." "Negative. I'm finishing this." She pulled out her emergency flare gun, loaded a round. "Just make sure the recording gets to CID. Whatever happens next, I want the truth on record." The helicopters were closer now. She could see them, 2 Blackhawks and an Apache escort. But whose helicopters? She'd find out soon enough. Nora fired the flare straight up, a bright red star that hung in the morning sky like a challenge. "Here I am. Come and get me." The first Blackhawk turned sharply toward her position. Through her binoculars, she could see the door gunner weapon trained on her location. But behind him, she saw something that made her smile: Kim's face. And beside him, Major Harrison, looking like he wanted to kill someone. The second Blackhawk was heading for Roar's position. She could imagine the conversation happening over the radio. Accusations, denials, demands for proof. But the proof was already uploaded to secure servers, Kim having worked as technical magic from the helicopter. The Apache circled overhead, a hunter waiting to see which prey to strike. In the end, it would come down to proof, testimony, and the kind of political moving around that happened far above her pay grade. But as the first Blackhawk settled onto the ridgeline and Kim jumped out, running toward her position, Nora knew she had already won the only victory that mattered. She'd survived against impossible odds, against betrayal and gravity and the cold math of top speed falling. She'd survived. "Jesus Christ, Nora," Kim said, taking in her injuries, the temporary sling, the obvious concussion, the way she held herself to protect broken ribs. "How are you even standing?" "Rangers don't quit," she said simply. "We also don't die easy." Behind them, she could hear shouting from Roar's position, the sounds of an arrest being made. The Delta team would face military court, conspiracy charges, attempted murder. Their careers were over, their reputations destroyed. But as the medics approached with a stretcher, Nora waved them off. "I'll walk," she said, even though each step sent lightning through her body. "I jumped out of a helicopter at 8,000 feet. I can make it to the bird." Harrison fell in a step beside her, his face unreadable. "King, what you did, surviving that fall, it's impossible." "No, sir," she replied, wincing as her knee tried to buckle. "It's just highly unlikely. There's a difference. The science alone, science is just math, sir. And I've always been good at math." She paused at the helicopter's door, looking back at the mountains that had almost become her grave. "Besides, Rangers don't need parachutes. We just need the will to survive and the knowledge of how to fall." As the Blackhawk lifted off, carrying her toward medical treatment and a certain investigation, Nora allowed herself one moment of satisfaction. Roar and his team had thrown her from a helicopter, expecting her to die screaming in the dark. Instead, she'd turned their murder attempt into their confession, their trap into their prison. The recorder in her pocket contained everything: their admission of guilt, their connection to the smuggling networks, their willingness to kill a fellow American soldier for money. Combined with the physical proof and Kim's technical watching, it would be more than enough for conviction. 3 weeks later, Nora stood in the same meeting room where it had all started. Her shoulder was still healing, her ribs still tender, but she was back in uniform. The investigation had been thorough, the proof overwhelming. Roar and his team were facing life in military prison. Staff Sergeant King, General Morrison, Commander JSOC, spoke to her from the stand. "What you survived makes no sense. The fall alone should have killed you. The injuries should have stopped you. The chase should have ended you. Yet here you stand." "Rangers lead the way, sir," she replied, the motto carrying new weight after everything. "Indeed they do." He held up a folder. which is why I'm offering you a choice: full medical retirement with honors or a new assignment. There's a unit that could use someone with your particular combination of skills and complete refusal to die. What kind of unit, sir? Morrison smiled. I had a feeling you'd say that. Report to Fort Bragg, Building 9. Someone will meet you there. As Nora left the meeting room, Kim caught up with her in the hallway. So, medical retirement or mystery assignment? What do you think? He laughed. I think they threw you out of a helicopter and you turned it into a promotion. I think you're physically unable to take the easy path. The easy path is boring, Nora replied, then winced as her ribs reminded her that the hard path had costs. Besides, someone needs to keep proving that Rangers don't need parachutes. That's not actually true, you know. The fall could have killed you. Should have killed you. Nora stopped walking, turned to face him. Danny, they threw me out of a helicopter at 8,000 feet because I was too good at my job. They betrayed everything we stand for out of greed. The fall didn't kill me because I refused to let their betrayal be the end of my story. She continued down the hallway, each step still painful, but getting stronger. Rangers don't quit, Danny. We don't quit when we're tired. We don't quit when we're hurt. And we sure as heck don't quit when someone throws us out of a helicopter. So what do? Nora smiled, the look sharp as a blade. We survive. We adapt. We overcome. And then we make them regret ever thinking we were just another problem to be removed. Behind them, the sun set over Fort Bragg, painting the sky the color of blood and gold. Somewhere in military prison, 5 former Delta Force soldiers were learning that betraying a Ranger wasn't just a mistake. It was a science lesson in how far someone could fall and still come back stronger. And somewhere in Building 9, a new kind of unit was about to gain its most unusual soldier, a woman who'd fallen 8,000 feet without a parachute and lived to tell about it. The video ends with actual footage from Nora's helmet camera recovered during the investigation. The moment of the push, the fall, the impact, all captured in grainy, nightmare-like detail. The investigation board had watched it dozens of times, trying to understand how she'd survived. The answer was simple and complicated at the same time. Training, preparation, and the complete refusal to accept death as an outcome. She'd calculated angles in free fall, used her body like a wing, found the one possible survival solution in 1,000 deadly alternatives. But more than that, she'd proven something that every Ranger knows but few truly test, that the human will, properly focused and trained, can overcome impossible odds. That sometimes the difference between death and survival isn't equipment or luck, but the simple refusal to stop fighting. Nora King became a legend in the special operations community, not for what she'd done on missions, though her record was excellent, but for being the Ranger who got thrown from a helicopter at 8,000 feet and not only survived, but came back to destroy the men who tried to kill her. They'd thought they were removing a problem. Instead, they'd created a legend. And legends, as any soldier will tell you, are much harder to kill than people. Rangers lead the way. Sometimes that way is straight down at top speed falling. But as Nora King proved on a cold night in the Korangal Valley, Rangers don't need parachutes. They just need the will to survive and the knowledge that falling isn't the same as failing. The only difference is whether you get back up. And Rangers always get back up. Have you ever faced a situation where everyone expected you to fail, only to prove that survival is more about mindset than situation? What would you do if betrayed by the very people meant to protect you? Could you find the will to survive an 8,000-foot fall without a parachute? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If this story reminded you that the human spirit is harder to kill than the human body, hit that like button and subscribe for more tales of impossible survival and unbreakable will. Share this with someone who needs to remember that falling isn't the same as failing. It's just another opportunity to prove how strong you really are. More stories of warriors who refuse to die are waiting on your screen. Watch those next, and remember, Rangers lead the way, even when that way is straight down. Until tomorrow, remember, they can't throw you from a helicopter, but they can't throw the Ranger out of you. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, you can subscribe to see more incredible stories like this.